Hey folks, and welcome back to the channel. Now I've got something very close to my heart for you in this video, something that I've been wanting to talk about in detail for quite some time now. Back in September, I set aside some funds from my Patreon supporters to use on commissioning a set of mods, which are available for the public, but were specifically designed for our Patreon Project Zomboid server. We're planning to do this setup on our server again, starting December 3rd, and there were a whole bunch of moving parts involved in this process, so I'm going to highlight some of the fantastic mods and the people involved in making this happen. This is how we made Stalker in Project Zomboid. If you find the video interesting and want to support the channel, remember to like the video and subscribe for more Zomboid videos just like this one. So firstly, a little introduction to the setup. What is Stalker and why did I choose to try and bring it to Project Zomboid? Well, Stalker is a video game franchise with 3 currently available titles, a very popular fan-made standalone mod called Anomaly, and another game that's in development currently aimed at releasing at the end of 2023. The story of said games was initially based on a book called Roadside Picnic, which was published in 1977. My experience, though, mostly comes from Stalker Anomaly, the fan-made standalone mod. The game transpires as an open-world survival game that drops you into the exclusion zone around the Chernobyl power plant known as the Zone. People from all walks of life come to the Zone to make their fortune, complete research, battle mutant horrors, and much more. Several factions make it their home and provide the player with quests, trading opportunities, and a different story depending on which faction you choose. The reason I wanted to bring the setting of Stalker to Project Zomboid and blend the two together is pretty simple, at least in my mind. Project Zomboid is a fantastic survival game that challenges the player again and again, but currently, once players are self-sufficient, they feel as though they have little to accomplish. Most of my aim with the mods we've had commissioned is to solve that problem, to give players more goals to accomplish and more things to shoot for as they survive for longer. Plus, you know, I love the Stalker franchise and I love Zomboid, and that was reason enough for me to get this whole thing going. Now, let's get into the first of the mods we had commissioned for this setup. This is probably also a good point for me to mention that the full mod pack for this setup is linked in the description, but do keep in mind that most of this is not a plug and play experience and setup is required from server admins. I'll be going over that in the rest of the video. One of the biggest parts of Stalker involves the factions and their HQ locations. You can trade there, you can pick up missions, you spawn there if you choose that faction, so we had to find a way to emulate that experience. On our first time running this setup, we actually built all of the faction HQs by hand using admin controls. It was a massive effort from the team and took many hours to complete. Whilst the finished product was something that we were immensely proud of, we wanted to make this easier, and thankfully, one of our server admins, Simon MD, had been experimenting with map making tools. Now, we have a full set of new and improved Stalker faction HQ locations ready to go in the form of modded maps. Not only does this make it much easier for our server team, but also it means anyone can simply add these mods to their server and the faction HQs are ready to go. No setup required in that regard. Each faction HQ is built to replicate the style of the faction from the Stalker games. Bandits live in a ramshackled and makeshift campsite with a bar and plenty of junk scattered around the area, whereas the more regimented factions like Duty or Military have sentry guard posts, large green tents and armory lockups to reflect their military background. Simon did an absolutely fantastic job with these, and he did it all completely for free. So I seriously can't thank him enough for his help with this, and I'd love to see you guys use his mods and check them out. So we've got the faction HQs, but we're missing a couple of key elements here, right? This is where the Stalker Factions, Occupations and Traits mod by Here comes in. This mod removes the currently available occupations from Project Zomboid and replaces them with the appropriate factions from Stalker. Each one has its own spawn location that corresponds with the appropriate faction HQ, as well as coming with a couple of unique bonuses and traits for your faction choice. For example, ecologists start with a higher foraging skill to help them find artifacts, and mercenaries start with the desensitized trait. There's a couple of unique outfit options for them as well, which requires the Stalker armor pack by Kind's Peace. So players can spawn at the HQs, but they wouldn't be complete without traders. This was probably the biggest part of the entire collection of mods and ended up being something that we were really pleased with. The Shops and Traders mod by Chuckleberry Finn allowed us to create several traders at each faction HQ location. This is where most of the manual setup comes in. The mod allows any admin to right-click an object and assign it as a store. We chose to use mannequins for this so that we could dress them up a bit, and since we don't have NPCs just yet, this seemed to fit the bill. From there you can add items, assign a monetary value, and also determine what kind of items they will buy and at what prices. Once you're done, you can switch back to the non-admin store menu and it's ready to go for your players. You can also copy existing traders for ease of use, and there's also an import and export function for files, so servers can use vendors they've used previously. So yeah, whilst there's a lot of setup required here, Chuck has tried his best to add some features for accessibility. We made 3 or 4 traders per HQ and broke them into food and drink vendors, medics, gear vendors, and weapon vendors. Thanks to Kind's Peace and his Stalker armor pack, we were able to provide plenty of unique uniforms, armor, and exoskeletons for players from every single faction. Each location had small tweaks to make them unique in some way, so things are a little bit varied. They each sold different weapons. The ecologists would buy artifacts at highest prices, much like in Stalker. Freedom and Bandit factions would buy alcohol at better rates, and you get the idea from there. We essentially crafted a working economy system, so we had to value everything carefully to make sure progression took a reasonable amount of time and people could sell items at a rate they were happy with, and so on. We also allowed vendors to buy jewelry items that players would often find on zombies or in jewelry stores, and they would also buy faction patches that could also be found on zombies or worn on their armor to represent their allegiance. We could set stock numbers too, meaning that players couldn't buy out massive amounts of ammunition or anything else for that matter. Money either found in the world or gained from traders was collected and added to a player's wallet, which could be spent or used as part of trades between players. This was probably our biggest learning experience from our first attempt at this setup, and I'm buzzing to give it another go in December, having learned from our first time setting up these vendors. So that brings us to the final element for the HQs that we wanted to add, and that's quests. A huge part of Stalker is picking up missions from traders and completing them for rewards. A couple of weeks before our first attempt at the Stalker setup, I came across OneLine's quest system mod and decided it would be a great feature for us to add. Now, we commissioned the modder to create a set of daily and weekly quests that players could collect from a single trader at each HQ location, with the intent to expand on this in the future. I created the quest descriptions, the requirements, and rewards that were made up for our quest pack. This was complete with money rewards, vendor profile avatars from the Stalker games, and it was honestly looking really cool. Unfortunately, we came up against a major bug, which meant that upon completion, expiry, or abandonment of a player's first quest from vendors, they would be told to, and I quote, "come back tomorrow" for their next quest. The problem here was that they would say this forever. No other quests would appear. We had hoped that this could be fixed, and we've relayed the bug to the mod's creator, but unfortunately we haven't received a resolution, and as such I've had to start looking elsewhere to develop a different quest mod entirely and make a new commission. The quest system is built on a specially designed language, so I suppose I'll also mention that since we commissioned the mod and would like to see it finished, if anybody out there wants to take a look at this mod to see if they can do that, I'll leave a link to that quest pack in the description as a separate link. Overall, it was a fantastic system, but unfortunately it's just non-functional and we won't be able to use it in our December setup for that reason. Okay, so moving on to some of our other mods that aren't related to the HQ locations. A large part of Stalker is artifact hunting, and artifacts in Stalker all have different properties and values, allowing the player to either craft armor upgrades for them or sell them for profit. And whilst we weren't able to simulate the upgrades part, thanks to Shark, we were able to create plenty of artifacts from the Stalker game and give them a monetary value. Shark also helped us to create many food and drink items that come from the Stalker franchise, which are both found in the world and purchased from traders. Now, these artifacts link to several other factors. Firstly, you need to be within a toxic toxic zone to find them. Soulfilcher, the mastermind of the Toxic Zones mod, created us a special version for our Stalker setup. Now these zones emulate areas of high radiation. They have an on-screen effect to let you know when you're inside one, and they cause slow damage to the player. Soulfilcher also hooked up usable gas masks, complete with filters that slowly get used up inside radiation areas. This keeps the player safe and is something they need to buy regularly if they want to hunt artifacts. They also need an echo detector, which Stalker players will be familiar with. This device is needed in order to be able to find artifacts, and without one, you won't find any at all. Artifacts were embedded into the standard foraging system in Project Zomboid, and as you level your foraging skill, rarer and more valuable artifacts will become more common finds. The neat part about using the foraging system is that, much like every other item found throughout foraging, different items have different chances to be found within different biomes. Certain artifacts are found more in urban areas, others in deep forests, farms, roads, and so on. We placed all of the toxic zones manually on our server, but this is pretty easy to do via the admin menu, allowing us as the server owners to place them just about anywhere we like, including areas of high loot as an extra barrier that players need to overcome, or in modded map areas, and avoiding compatibility issues with other maps altogether. On top of all this, Soulfilcher also already had a mod called Anomalous Storm, which does exactly what it says on the tin and adds a hazardous storm to the game which requires you to take shelter. We use these to replicate the emissions, blowouts, and size storms of the Stalker franchise that would require the player to head inside for the duration. Now the last thing I briefly want to talk about in this video is our firearms choice. The world of Stalker is obviously different than Project Zomboid in this regard, and has a lot more of a focus on firearms, so we wanted to introduce a lot more variety here. Now initially we started with Britas for our first run, which we quickly found was, to be frank, a bit of a pain in the ass to get working as we liked it. We managed it in the end, but after our first experience with this mod on multiplayer, we immediately started looking into alternatives. As some of you have seen from my posts on the YouTube community page, that mod has been in the works, and as I write this, we're hoping to release the first stage of the mod with the new wipe in December. This is made by StendoClip, the creator of the vanilla Firearms expansion mod, and can be directly attached to that mod for more variety. This is just stage 1, and we're hoping to add lots more variety, including several more weapons and attachments. All of the screenshots you're seeing as part of this footage are a work in progress, but should give you an idea of the sorts of variety we're working towards. Our friend Soulfilcher is also currently looking into a mod that will allow server admins to change the condition of firearms found in the world, as the vanilla Firearms expansion mod has some repair items that can be used to maintain your weaponry. So essentially, you can buy a full condition firearm from a trader, or you can find one out in the world and attempt to restore it if you can find or buy what you need to do so. So that's just about it for our Stalker setup. Hopefully you guys enjoyed finding out a bit more about it, and I would like to invite you all to let me know what kind of features you might want to see added to this setup in the future. Feel free to be as creative as you would like. Obviously certain things like mutants might not be possible until build 42, but yeah, I'd love to hear what you guys think on this. I would also like to take this opportunity to say a massive thank you to all of the modders that worked with us on this, and I encourage you guys to try out their mods or even commission some mods of your own from them. Also a huge thank you to my admin team on the server that helped make all of this possible with their tireless work. Lastly, a very special thank you to all of my patrons that support the channel on a monthly basis and have joined us on the server for the Stalker setup in December. If you want to join them, there's a link in the description so you can get whitelisted ready for that when we plan to launch on December 3rd. Please keep in mind that Patreon will charge on the 1st of the month, so if you aren't interested in our current cryogenic winter wipe and want to avoid paying twice, I'd recommend joining on December 1st. Thanks guys, and I will see you all in the next one.